Hello, everybody. My name's Tom Stickland, and I am a senior consultant with TRG Arts. Thank you for joining us today. Today's webinar we've called Income and Impact, Refocusing Your Campaigns to Your Core Revenue. And I will be guiding you through. I work with arts organisations in the UK, where I'm based, as well as in the US and Canada, to try and generate the recurring revenue that underpins the business models of arts organisations, theatres, orchestras, art centres, to try and support their recurring revenue that underpins their business models and make sure that they're getting the most out of their efforts to increase subscription, ticket sales and donations. There's a Q&A function, which you should use if you can see it, but equally if you don't have the Q&A function visible, then by all means drop questions into the chat. We'll jump through a Q&A session at the end, but if you want to drop questions in as they come into your head, by all means, that's the way to do it. Great. You found your way here today, so you must have some familiarity with TRG Arts, but we're a change agency that focuses on how arts organisations build a strong base of loyalty to drive revenue growth. We do it because we love the arts and the passion of the people working in the arts and want to support your organisations to build the models and modes of work that will support your long-term future. I'm going to be orienting you today towards making data-driven campaign decisions that consider where you should invest your time, money, and effort in order to see the best return for your organisation. So I've said I'm focusing on core revenue, but what do I mean by that? When I say core revenues, what I'm talking about is the reliable forms of income on which your business is built. We want to maximize the reliable core of your business so that you have those recurring streams year in and year out that are protected from volatility in demand. For most North American organizations, that means let's focus on our subscriber base first sometimes. Sometimes it means let's build that system up first so that we know the revenue we're going to have. We've built an engine that year in, year out will renew 80+%, and then we'll achieve growth by looking at the ladder of people through our organization and making sure they're making that step up and that step in the direction of entering that recurring relationship with you. However, it's not just about subscribers. In the UK where I'm based, we don't really have a culture of subscription in the same way. Your core revenue could be driven from people elsewhere on that ladder of loyalty. So whether it is people who are reliable single ticket buyers, maybe the Panto buyers who book every single year, year in, year out, or audiences who multi-buy, maybe they're buying 2, 3, 4 shows a year. Or maybe it's people who've interacted reliably but with lower frequency than full package buyers. Maybe they're coming every year to certain work, but these are a core audience who we need to be thinking about. How do we renew them? How do we keep them? How do we retain them? So this ladder is something that you will see anytime that you encounter a TRG Arts consultant or any of our work together. We look at the evolution of the patron, and we have this idea that most people are going to enter somewhere towards the bottom of this ladder, and we're going to be thinking about what the right next step is for them to take as they deepen their relationship with us. We sometimes like to think about it in terms of dating, right? You wouldn't ask somebody after the first date to marry you. What's the right next question to ask somebody? It's to take a second date. It's the second step. It's to come back one more time, right? It's the same idea with our ladder of loyalty here. And when we focus on core revenue, we're looking at people slightly higher up that ladder, the people who we have that relationship with, but we're really thinking about how can we maximize, how can we make sure that our campaigns are reaching them and that we're asking them just to take that one next step, whether that is a renewing step, whether that is an upgrading step. What's your core business, your business's core revenue will be specific to you, but ask yourself, what do we rely upon? Is it a steady base of mid-level donors or members? Is it 3-show multi-buyers? Is it regular attenders for entertainment shows? Who are your core audience who you're renewing year in, year out? And how are you communicating with them specifically? Too often, we're engaging with organizations who have these core revenues. They're such a valuable pot of people and reliable source of income, but they just leave them be, confident that they will look after themselves with the same light touch campaigns that they've had for years. You get good enough renewal, retention, or upgrade rates, but perhaps it slips slightly, but because the number at the bottom of that column is still high, we just let it go. But is good enough for you? Are we just leaving those reliable streams to renew themselves? Are those rates holding up? When did you last refresh your approach to communicating with those groups? Are you asking them in the right way? And are you asking for more? You all have an existing and engaged audience, and we want to make sure you're making the most of those so that you can be efficient. We know there are two routes to ticket growth. We either acquire more and more people into our bucket, or we address that leaking bucket and we renew those people and we increase their level of engagement. Which takes more time and effort? Well, we know it's more expensive to acquire those new audiences, right? We know that that the cost of reaching those new audiences who we don't know is much more expensive. So could we just recycle our audiences better with more focused campaigns? We're not going to do away with acquisition. There's always going to be a taste for new audiences. There's always going to be a need for new audiences to refill here. But we're encouraging organizations to just shift their focus a little bit towards, well, what does it look like to communicate a little bit better with those core revenue groups? If you're here today, then you'll know how we think we should be approaching them, and that is through rigid campaign planning, being really thorough about who you're contacting and when. Are you recording every planned piece of activity, who it's going to, and doing it in a way that's going to allow you to subsequently track its impact? When are you looking at those where messages are most effective with response reporting? If you aren't planning, as the old adage goes, to fail to plan is to plan to fail, right? We've all heard that. We've all heard that before, and I don't think that's quite enough, because we actually need a good plan. We need a good plan in order for us to be able to reach those audiences and grow them in the way that we want them to. It's not enough just a plan. You've got to have a good one. And the building blocks for a good plan is one that reaches the right person. Who are we asking? The most likely people to respond to our message? Are we asking the right message? What are we asking? Can we personalize that message based on what we know is the motivator for that particular group? And can we distill it to one simple action, the right next step for that individual? And are we asking at the right time? When are we asking? Are we asking early enough? Are we asking often enough? Are we keeping going back to them with the same message until they have taken that one next step? Or are we bombarding them with a wide range of messages, with the pressure of so many different shows and so many different individual campaigns that it all gets lost in the noise? When we're thinking about planning our campaigns around core revenues, then we want to focus very first on our existing audience as the lowest cost and most renewable group. As I said, no campaign is without acquisition and elements that reach new audiences. But if we prioritize retention early, then we have the best indicators of early demand. If something is doing really well with your core, there's a great signs there that this is going to be a super popular production. Whereas if they're not responding in the numbers that you would hope, you know that this is going to be a more challenging campaign. And if you're really focusing that activity a bit earlier than you used to do, then you're going to get those indicators all that much earlier. And how are we going to make sure that we're reaching the right people with the right message at the right time? Well, we're going to segment. Are we interested in Yeah, we're interested in interrogating what marketing activity is working and who is responding to our asks for renewing and upgrading behavior. So if you've done anything with TRG Arts before, you'll know that segmentation is a TRG consultant's love language. We love it. And we will always ask that there's at least some segmentation in every single piece of campaign activity that you do. And it isn't because we're sadistic torturers of marketing and development departments. It's because we love them and we want to make their lives easier. But the only route to knowing what is effective is to have those segments to track. And I always think it's a little bit like sorting out your Lego, right? What is what are the groups that you're going to choose that in order to group them by? Is it to do with size? Is it to do with the color of the pieces? Is it to do with the set that they originally came from? There's all these different questions about how we will best divide these groups into segments. And how many segments is the right number of segments? Well, this clip is from Minority Report. I'm not sure if people remember that, but there's a bit of a concept that we're on a journey to a segmentation of one, that every message you receive is targeted just to you. Your tastes shape the perfect ask, offer, mode of communication, and you're guided gently to the perfect purchase every time. We're not quite here yet, right? With the developments in machine learning and AI are making it ever more easy to dynamically message, but we're not quite at the segment of one just yet. But if one segment per individual is too many, and trust me, it absolutely is, then what's the right number of segments for you? It depends. We're in panto season in the UK, so I'm going to have to go with a Goldilocks reference. It's not too hot, it's not too cold, but it's just right. It's got to be just right for your organization. I would always start with identifying the behaviors that you want to see and those most ready to take the next step towards them. It's easiest with subscription campaigns. We have the most likely to renew in the current subs, and then the current audiences with regular ticket buying, and then working through lapsed subscribers to reactivate them. But with a single ticket campaign, we have to think more about crossovers and comparators, but behavior is still a really important factor in there. Take two attenders to the same show. A multi-buyer on one hand with propensity to book contemporary drama is probably more likely to come to your next edgy piece than the person who came to you for the first time because they recognized someone in the show from the telly, right? So the behavior that these audience members have shapes the likelihood of their next action and shapes the way that we should be talking to them. I would suggest even more than what it is that they previously saw. Then we look at your capacity to deliver. There's no point you saying, oh, we're going to have 20 different segments and we're going to write 20 different variants of copy if you don't have the capacity to deliver that. If you don't have the capacity to do the work and track the work, then let's thin it down to what is actually manageable for you and your team. If you can't handle a handful of different segments, then I would suggest there's probably other things that your team need to stop doing in order to prioritize this work of really personalizing the message and the ask. The ideal number is going to land somewhere between the maximum that you can handle and the right number of and the right numbers of behaviors that you're seeing. I would write out both lists. How many you think you could handle, as well as the all of the different messages that you expect to see, and then you want to consider who would be receiving practically the same message. Combine those and iteratively determine the right number for you. Sometimes you need to launch your campaign with a broader grouping until you can refine down to those who are most likely to respond. For US organizations, we've got a solution that's going to help you here, and that is our data center response reporting. And I'm going to step us to the ways that we can track that down. But if you don't have that, then there's other ways that we can keep an eye on those response rates in a lo-fi way, and I'll step us through that to begin with. We're interested in household response rate, and we want to break it down by segment to see where to focus our efforts. What we're looking at here is response reporting. We're taking the total number of responses and we're dividing it by the total households, and that's giving us a percentage response rate. This is very crudely going to tell you how different segments have performed. What's a good number here? Well, you'll come to learn this as you practice this particular muscle, but because across different arts organizations, I've seen response rates from 0.5% up to 100%. And so the best comparisons live within your organizations and within your campaign. But overall, if you aren't getting a regular response rate, at least at 5 or 10%, then it's legitimate to ask if it's really worth your team's time or whether you focus that communication down enough. It could be that this messaging is a very broad stroke. And you actually only need a very low response rate in order to get the level the level of income that you require. But remember that these people who we're focusing on contacting early, should be your higher responders. They are people who are engaged with you. We aren't just in the dark here. We are deliberately targeting people who we know who should be taking a particular action. So we want to see higher response rates than you would see in other campaigns that you're running. All sorts of different things impact response rates. It's a ripe testing ground for some A/B testing. There are thousands of measures you can do on email campaigns, but the strength of this metric is that it can apply across multiple channels as a comparator. If I was in a room with you all now, we'd be putting some post-it notes on a window to say what are the things that could affect a campaign response rate. I'm sure you have others, but here are some things that impact those response rates and could be honed in your campaigns. Obviously, we know visual impact, a clear call to action. Is that copy compelling? Let's A/B test. Let's see what's going to change that response rate. Time sensitivity. Are we asking things with a deadline? Are we encouraging people to respond, giving them a reason to respond? Is this an audience who we're targeting where we are seeing some price sensitivity? Let's test and see what is impacting the level of response rates that we're seeing. Is this the appropriate next step based on the previous engagements that they've had with you? Are we asking too much? Are we asking them to marry us on that first email? Is this the right next step given how they've interacted before? And many other things. If you've only got a segment size of 5 people, you might be aiming for 100% response rate in that group. The segment size is a factor. The size of the incentive. Are we offering a big enough offer if we're doing something that we know is going to take some easing into that to that next step? Database hygiene. How many of these emails or messages are going out to audience members who are no longer there? Capacity to spend and give. If this is a development and fundraising campaign, then are we targeting the right people? Have we looked at the behaviors sufficiently to know what the right ask is for these groups? All these different things impact our response rates. And so we want to think about the next we want to think about how you're applying this. Let's imagine you're building the campaign plan for a single ticket campaign for the first show of your new season. You want to send a mailing out to past ticket buyers who came to each of 3 productions in your last season. You don't have the budget to mail all of them, but you know that the mail is the most effective tool to provoke your audience into action. So let's send out an email with an early booking offer to all segments. It's a low cost. It's a high impact. It's a low cost. It's lower impact than the mail, but it's a moment in time that you're trying to just test to see what segments are going to respond the strongest. Let's track it. And then let's chase those audiences with the highest response rates and follow up with postcards to everyone in that segment who's not booked. Let's really make sure that those segments with the highest response rates are ones that we go back to again and again until we've got the best return that we can out of those most likely to respond. For data center clients, this is the more sophisticated approach that we have. We can run a response report on your data. We can take in all the lists included in your mailings and their various iterations and run a full detailed response report. This will go beyond the segmentation strategy in your campaign plan, and we'll see if there's another list of patrons in there who's responding with greater vim than the others. Currently, this is US only, as I say, but if you're working with us in the UK or in Canada, we'll work with you to track similar metrics in other ways. In this approach, you'll start at the top line and see how many tickets were sold and what value and the average yield. Along the side, we get the response reporting overall, what your response rate is, and in the table, when people, in this chart, when people responded. And this chart is pulling out some of the top responding segments so that you can see if their timing was any different to the general campaign, if they behaved slightly differently to any others. So you can learn from how those top performing segments were also responding. It's all good top level stuff. We'll then drill down to top and bottom performing segments where you can see the overall proportion of responders that each segment represents, as well as splitting by different segment types. Did you have more success in this campaign with single ticket buyers or with people who are on subscriber lists? Or what combination of segments would have got you most of the way there? If this is a big mailing and you want to think, oh, next time I do this, I need to really thin down to the very top performing segments. We'll look and see how many segments you would need to have mailed to reach 85% of where you did in terms of responses. So how you can thin down that group of people to be really targeted to the highest responding. It also comes with a segment by segment breakdown of all of this same information, so you can really drill into which segments you'd like to look at in future campaigns. What we're getting to here is activity effectiveness. The purpose of the activity is to provoke a response. Has it been successful? Yes, the response rate will tell us how successful. But we could do lots of very expensive activities to generate this response. And in order to get the focus onto core revenues, we also need to think about the costs associated. And that's when we get to costs of sale. Oh, sorry. This is as close as the golden rule as we get to in TRG Arts. Cost of sale. We love it. We ask this question all of the time. It is calculated as total income over total costs, and it's expressed as a percentage. If you have an idea of how efficient your marketing efforts are, you're well equipped to ask, can we do more and should we do more? We like this measure more than the ROI calculations that some of you might do already, which is largely built off the same numbers, because we've found that the human brain struggles with comparing percentages over 100%, which is hopefully where most of your ROI numbers are right now. With costs of sale, you shouldn't be needing to compare percentages over 100% too often, because as soon as it tips over 100%, alarm bell should be ringing. It's costing you more to sell than you'll get back. It's hard to imagine where that's going to be a good strategy. That said, the number that you're aiming for is highly situational. Are you frequently sold out? Let's not overinvest if your show is going to sell out anyway at a lower cost of sale. Is your market? Are there opportunities for growth in your marketplace? Can you grow? Are there new audiences who you want to be tapping into? Is the sales target realistic? We have to face facts sometimes and say, have we set this target based on what we think we actually can achieve, or have we put the target where we need to achieve for certain other budgetary reasons? Are we projecting based on audience behavior? Is our sales target realistic? If our sales target is going to be a push, we might have to up the balance of acquisition that we have in this pot in order to, and in doing so, it costs 3 to 4 times more to bring in a new audience member than an existing one. So that cost of sale needs to be higher in order to deal with a different audience mix. Is your database highly penetrated? If you're already selling this show to much of your existing database, you're going to have to push up the acquisition side of things, and that's going to push up the cost of sale cost. And are you investing for paid patron growth or other institutional realities? Are there strategic purposes that you are acknowledging as necessary for the future of your organization? Are you developing a new audience for certain works? Are there other needs that this particular piece of work demonstrates that is important? The key thing is that we are thinking about this production by production. We are not thinking about this holistically, as the whole organization, we are going, what is the right cost of sale for this production? And these factors have fed into our decision making to support them, to support our ability to get there. So you've started to track cost of sale by production. That would be great. That would be a first win. But tracking isn't doing, right? We gotta actually turn this into action. There's a show in the UK called Antiques Roadshow, and there's a section in it called Basic, Better, Best, where you have to guess which of the 3 antiques is worth the most. I won't make you guess today, but I just thought this slide would need a bit of transatlantic translation before I move on to explain Basic, Better, and Best versions of the cost of sale budgeting. This is a really common approach to budgeting. Let's just set an amount of money and go with it per show. So let's set the same amount of money for every show. This is a UK example, so I hope my US friends and colleagues don't have a meltdown about how small these marketing budgets are. But what if we budgeted the same dollar amount for every production? It's going to mean that those production by production costs of sale fluctuate quite wildly. It's a starting point. We've heard what gets measured gets managed, but we don't really believe it, because what we believe is what gets managed, right? We've got to actually do something about it. We can't just measure these facts. This situation leads to you potentially underinvesting in where the greatest potential for your revenue lies. Here, because they've budgeted £3,000 for their highest performing show in show 1, it only has a cost of sale of 2%. Great. But what if you spent a bit more money there? If the cost of sale is genuinely 2% on this show, then you are getting £100 for every £2 you invest. So why would you not look to invest more if the marketing is that effective? And you're potentially over investing in those shows with low potential, right? You're putting 20% for this organization is a very high cost of sale, and this is their lowest performing show in show 3. If there could be a good reason to invest more in that show, but are you going into it with your eyes open? With this approach, absolutely not. There's no strategic decision making on, we're just going to have a flat marketing contra for every single show. It's going to be much more to do with it's not responsive to what your strategic needs are. It's just going, that's what the budget is for the show. The better version of this approach is to go, okay, so what is the cost of sale for our organization? Let's zoom out and go, okay, the cost of sale that we achieve in general is 5%. And then you look and go, okay, this is where we're targeting to hit. So we therefore should budget an amount of money that requires that that will get you to the target revenue. This is a better approach because it's responsive to your expected demand, right? You'll see that the expenses are different for each of the different shows depending on where you're expecting to go. You're still potentially underspending whenever you have those opportunities. Like we might want to be able to spend a bit more and push on that blockbuster a bit more, or we might want to strategically spend a bit more elsewhere if it's important to us that we sell a specific show. If show number 3's actual cost of sale ends up being close to 20%, then you're going to sell a lot less tickets to that show. So are you actually responding to where you think the demand is and where the actual cost of sale is going to land in this approach? Not so much. Are we limiting the potential of those top performers? Are we not going to meet the targets of our more challenging products? And it relies on the confidence in your targeting, right? You've got, if you are confident about where these shows are going to end up, then this cost of sale approach might make a bit more sense. But we know that demand fluctuates, so we need to be adaptive, which takes me on to our best version of this, right? Is to go, let's actually think show by show, what is the right cost of sale for this work? Now, this might look a bit chaotic, but that is because you can't see all of the underpinning work that this theatre was doing in making this decision. The expectations were high on show 1, so in budgeting they wanted to not rely on popularity to sell it, but but lent in on the average cost of sale of the organization, understanding that there was great potential there. If the real cost of sale ends up being 2% on this show, then they have got the scope within their budget to be able to push on. Show 3 was of strategic importance here, and so they thought, okay, let's actually budget a bit more there to push on what get the target to where it needs to be for what the minimum viable show could hold. And of course, all of this needs monitoring throughout the cycle. There might be a point in time where you go, actually, our cost of sale for some of these shows is so low that it's worth investing more and not being tied to a budget expense amount for each of these shows. But cost of sale is what's going to tell us that. So that is where it's such a useful tool in tracking through these decisions. It's a more strategic approach. It can prioritize according to revenue and organizational goals. Where there's demand, we can capitalize on it and make the most of that potential that show 1 was potentially showing. And it relies on data. It relies on looking and thinking about what the purpose of each show is and having a shared understanding of what the cost of sale should be based on your strategic needs. What the right ratio for your organization is always going to depend on all sorts of different things. We looked at it on about the things that impact it show by show, but it's also you have to think about your strategic goals as an organization. Do you have ambitious targets that you're pushing onto? Are your sales growing? Are they flat? Are they in decline? Do you need to have more investment? Are programs sold out consistently? And if they are, can you create more capacity and use cost of sale as a good indicator of how much investment it's going to take to sell that additional capacity? What's your current market penetration? Is there great opportunity in your market, or are you already serving most of the arts attenders in your catchment area? What competition exists in the market? And we're looking beyond the arts, we're looking into sport, we're looking also into what is taking up people's time on specific nights. I've worked on shows where we've upped the cost of sale for specific performances because we know that they are clashing with major television events and all sorts of other things that you have to draw people away from. So using cost of sale to deal with when you see there's going to be a challenge early on is going to make sure that you are investing in success of building that core revenue. The best practice range that we're recommending for you is in North America, 20 to 35% cost of sale. In the UK, we recommend 10 to 15% cost of sale at a target range to exist within. There's going to be all sorts of reasons that you might go, this is going to be extra high, or this is an extra high cost of sale, or maybe a reason to go, this is going to be a lower cost of sale because we know it's going to sell out anyway. But these are the target ranges that we want you to have in mind whenever you're using using cost of sale in your planning for your planning purposes. As a data center client, your response report is also going to grab cost of sale data for you, and it's going to do it segment by segment, and it's going to tell you the segments that cost more for you to contact than you got returned from that specific segment. Those over 100%, it's going to highlight. It's also going to tell you your top and bottom performers here, as you can see on this slide, so that you can have a good idea of actually what's it costing to reach certain people, certain groups of people based on their previous behavior. And you can make the most of those with the lower cost of sale and go, well, maybe it's worth doing some extra pushes in those areas if there's capacity left to sell into those segments. Then lean in where the cost of sale is giving you the space to do so. Here's some examples. Let's consider different scenarios. This is a chart showing the number of tickets sold at each point on the sales cycle. The blue line is the expected sales curve, and the black line is actual sales to date. Production 1 that we see here is struggling and performing well below expectation. It's looking like they won't cover their costs. Some of the performances are looking very empty, and the cost of sale is 78%. They've put a lot of money into this show, but it's just not shifting. What questions does this raise? Why is the cost of sale so high? Is it a show that you always expected to be a higher acquisition show? Is there a big cost in that campaign that hasn't really landed yet, like some outdoor that's still to come? Or is it confusing audiences what this experience will be and the message just isn't cutting through? What is the minimum that you need to sell to actually put this show on? Should you continue to invest if a show is in this situation of being so high cost of sale? Should you adjust to go, we're just going to have a lower capacity show, like a lower sold show this time around, or should you continue to invest? Production 2 is performing similarly, but has a much lower cost of sale. And when we see this sort of thing, we ask what activity has actually happened. We should be really careful not to write off a production before it's had the chance. Is there low awareness? How far away is the event? Can we get some quick activity out now and see if it shifts tickets and maintains a healthy cost of sale? Remember that cost of sale is a dynamic measure and it rises and falls through the campaign. And if it starts to drift up, you should react to that. It's not unusual for desperation to shift tickets for a show with lower demand, to shift spend to shows with lower demand, and push a cost of sale up beyond 100%, and that means that you're paying more for than the ticket value to sell each ticket. And is there a situation where that's justified? Rarely. And now we look at production 3. It's super popular. It's selling, and its cost of sale is 10%, and that's been dropping every week. How should you adjust your marketing investments between these 3 shows? The temptation here is to lean into those struggling shows. There are internal pressures from your artistic team, and the pursuit of the target is in our marketing instincts. The popular show will sell itself, but the costs of sale are showing us how much extra effort it will take to grow ticket sales for those struggling productions. My purest form of advice here would be to lean into the blockbuster, spend the money where it's most efficient, and that looks like production 3 here. But there is richer detail required. Have we given production 2 a chance? Have we spent enough money on there to really test whether that cost of sale is solid? Is production 3 pacing towards a sellout at current pace of sale? Do you need to do anything else to get you there? If so, is there any chance of an extension? We can only sell the capacity we have, so we can divert funds to the marketing, but if it's selling out before the production opens, then we'll have overinvested. What is the minimum audience we need for each performance? Operationally, and for the experience of those first timers coming to experience our theatre and our work for the first time, what is the minimum number that we're comfortable with? Could we look at closing sections of the auditorium and dress those houses better rather than spending good money after bad in the marketing campaigns? If you're a receiving or presenting space, then you also need to layer on the deal implications of the marginal revenue. If we're in a call or under the guarantee, then all that ticket revenue is coming to you. So you would look to invest as long as that cost of sale remained below 100%. But if you're in a split with big royalties, then the higher performing show might not net the same income to you as the difference it makes making up the guarantee in production 2. The additional layer to this is secondary spend impact. Even if you aren't making as much money on the ticket revenue, does potentially higher volume offset that on a show that has a higher average spend per head than others? All sorts of reasons why you need to use cost of sale as a guide, but then interrogate it to help make your decisions about what to do. So what's the right next step for you? If you're already tracking and responding to your response rates, and you budget using cost of sale, and you're running complex segmented campaigns that are maximizing your core revenue in a cost efficient and strategic way, then marvelous. But I would bet that there is something bothering you from today that you could just tweak and start to improve in your strategies. We want to make those next steps simpler for you. So there's a simple questionnaire you can fill in on our website that will ask you about your current marketing campaign practices. It will step you through your budgeting, your segmentation, your campaign planning, and how you are tracking and responding to those key metrics. Once you complete the assessment, you'll be given some pointers on where we see your next steps to a more impactful approach that drives revenue. It's only 14 questions long, and I would encourage you to do it right away. As for you today, I believe that this is the one right next step. Great. Thank you, everybody. I hope that's given you some food for thought about what some of our current thoughts about the best things to track in a campaign are in order to make sure you're having the impact. We're now going to have a Q&A session where I can answer any questions that have come up throughout the session. I'm joined by my colleague, Peter. Say hello, Peter.
Hi folks, I'd say good to see you. I can't see you, but I can see your names. So it's good to have you here with us. Should we dive into a question, Tom?
Let's do it.
Great. Feel free to drop questions in as we go. We've got a couple here, but we've got until the end of the hour. So do have a think and reflect, or have a look at the assessment and fill that in with the time you've got here. We've got a question from Emily. Thanks, Emily. What are your thoughts on referral incentives as a way to get existing patrons to bring a new arts goer to your event or show?
Yeah, referral is a great way of making people of finding people who fit into the same mold as the people who have referred them. So what I would think about is who it is you're asking, you're incentivizing to do the referral. Is it people who are behaving in a particular way? Is it multi-buyers? Is it subscribers? Is it those higher dependents? Is it those higher value households who you're encouraging to do that, in the hope that they then bring people in who are behaving in a similar way and contributing to that core revenue? There are referral benefits on a show by show basis. If you're trying to just kind of drive word of mouth, absolutely. But where the real value comes is if you can drive referral into that core revenue base by going, actually, yes, it's great for us to get new audiences, and it's a potentially cheaper way to do it, as long as it's time bound and as long as it's going into those right performances that isn't offsetting our income too much. But if you can think about a way for that to be a referral into a core behavior, a multi-buying, a package buying behavior, then it's going to be all that much more valuable to you.
Great, thanks, Tom. And then a question in two parts from Jessica. I'll start with the first. Do you have any budgeting advice for repertory theatres regarding full season budgeting versus doing the budgeting show by show?
Yeah, so you have a budget for a season, absolutely. But what I want you to do is break it down show by show and identify those shows that and identify a specific cost of sale against each one. I know that you're not when you come into a whole season, you're going to need an overarching budget, and you will have ambitions in there that say, oh, we're going to hit a revenue goal of this, and we're going to do this, and we're going to sell this many tickets. Great. But once we get more granular into that and really test our assumptions about single tickets and about subscription growth, then, well, subscription growth is at a season level. But if we can be granular about our single ticket targets and look at what proportion of those is coming from new and what proportion of those is coming from our existing audience are we expecting based on the programming, it will then really impact what you think the cost of sales should be for each of those productions, and then how you focus your spend throughout the season on those individual ones. You will be budgeting on a season level for subscriptions, absolutely. I was kind of digging into single tickets when I got to cost of sale on that, but we do know about costs of sale for subscription levels and know that it costs more to renew a first timer than it does a long timer, and we know about actually and the highest cost of sale there, the cost of sale for a first time subscriber is sometimes extremely high. It's sometimes in the realm of about 65%, right? Because it's about bringing them in for that first season. And then as they renew each time, it goes down and down and down. So if you can split up your expectation of subscribers, new first timers, and long-term subscribers, if you can split up your single ticket buyers of new and acquisition, then it's going to help you to understand where you're going to need to really invest in those campaigns.
And I think the second part, and Jessica, do jump in the chat if I've misunderstood this part of your question. I think you're asking about budgeting advice for branding and what role brand and brand loyalty might have in some of these conversations?
Yeah, it's all about deepening relationships. It's all about the brand. It's all about building the sense of identity in there, right? This is it's a whole other topic for us to dig into. Is that what does that deeper relationship look like? But what we're evoking in our messaging in so many of these is about deepening your relationship and building your question with the band. With the brand. I've spotted another the other question come up there from Anna, and it's distracted me because I think there's some Anna has asked me about how much I've confused them by saying that that you shouldn't invest in a show that's going to sell out. I'm not saying that. I'm saying invest up to the point that you know it's going to sell out. Like if you're super confident, if it's pacing to such an extent that you know this show's going to sell out, let's not pour in additional investment. I'm not saying divert the originally budgeted funds. I'm saying make sure you get to that sellout point. And for most people, for most organizations, there's going to be a number of performances that sell out, but very rarely lots of productions that sell out. So thinking about how you're messaging that scarcity and making the most of it. It's absolutely fine to sell out, and it's great to sell out. And when you do sell out, you should shout about it because it really reinforces scarcity messaging. I'm not saying do not invest in those top selling shows. I'm saying if you've reached the point where you are certain that you're going to run out of inventory, that is not the time to pour in additional funding.
Great. And the final question here from Anna and Thomas. What advice do you have for refining a message for patrons on specific steps of the ladder? How is your messaging different for single ticket buyers versus multi-buyers, as an example on that ladder?
Yeah. So the messaging is different because what's the right next ask is step one of that, is going, my messaging is different that if you're a single ticket buyer and you've come once, I'm just going to ask you to come once again. If you're a multi-ticket buyer, I'm going to ask you to buy multiple tickets again. In terms of the tone of that messaging, it's also about recognizing that relationship and thinking about those brand ideas that we were just speaking about and going, actually, those people who are higher up the ladder have a deeper sense of engagement with your organization, and we can use messaging that thanks them, acknowledges them, and encourages them to more deeply engage, and makes the point that they are part of the core of that audience, even if they aren't subscribers just yet. They are super important to you, and that you are still you are super grateful for their behavior, and you want to encourage it. So the messaging is different because the ask is different. The messaging is different because the tone is different about where they are in their journey with you. Lower down the ladder, you might want to be more practical about what it's going to be like, how this experience might be different to others, and how and why and more production focused. You get more and more organization focused as people climb up that ladder and have a deeper relationship with you.
Great, thanks, Tom. I can't see any other questions in there, but please do pop them in the last few minutes. If not, you will receive a copy of the recording of today's webinar and the deck, as well as another link to remind you to take the marketing assessment. It takes about 5 or 6 minutes, and as Tom said, there'll be some useful, actionable insights and next steps that you can take from that assessment, which will be emailed to you after you complete that. And naturally, if you have any questions beyond that as well, please do get in touch with us. We are here. There's a live chat, and you can schedule a call with us on our website as well. So please do reach out if you have any further questions or clarity as well. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody.